guys! Today we're going to learn about a man named Gideon. Now, Gideon was a judge in Israel.
Order in the court!
No, not that kind of judge. Now, a judge back then was someone that God would choose to lead the people away from sinning and back toward living their lives for God. Judges were also in charge of the army. You see, when Gideon was alive, there was this group of people called the Midianites that were being really mean and violent, and they were taking over the land the Israelites lived in. They were taking the Israelites' crops and livestock, making it difficult for the Israelites to find food and keep their families safe. So the Israelites prayed and prayed for a leader, someone that could help them rise up and fight off the Midianites. And that's where Gideon comes in. Now, God equipped Gideon with bravery, courage, and leadership to take this group of Israelites and form an army to help protect their land and get the Midianites out of there. Even though Gideon was the least experienced person in his family and from the weakest clan, he still chose to obey God. So he gathered up this big group of Israelites, and they were all raring to go, just ready to get out there and take on that big, bad Midianite army. It was going to be this epic showdown, a battle between two fierce armies that could last days and days. Or maybe not. You see, God wanted to make sure the Israelites knew it was because of him that the battle would be won. So Gideon's big army wouldn't stay big for long. The Bible tells us that Gideon had 32,000 men in his army. Woo! That's a lot of soldiers. But nowhere close to the number of soldiers in the enemy's army. They had 135,000. Whoa! But before Gideon and his army could go off to battle, God told Gideon that 32,000 soldiers was too many. God instructed Gideon to tell the men that anyone who was afraid could go home. Gideon obeyed, and 22,000 scared soldiers chose to go home. That left Gideon with, don't carry the one, only 10,000 men? Much less than 32,000, but 10,000 soldiers might still be enough to get the job done, to go fight and give the Midianites the old heave-ho. But wait, God wasn't done making changes to Gideon's army. He told Gideon that 10,000 was still too many. So God gave Gideon another set of instructions, a sort of water test for the soldiers. He took the soldiers to a stream to get something to drink. Any soldier who brought the water to their mouth and lapped it like a dog was set aside to remain with Gideon. Everyone else was sent home. What? The army of 10,000 was now only 300 men? Can you imagine that? Gideon leading his teeny-tiny army of 300 up against a huge Midianite army? Kind of scary, huh? Well, because God knew Gideon was a little nervous about the situation, God spoke to Gideon and said, "Arise, go down against the camp, for I have given it into your hand. And you shall hear what they say, and afterward your hands shall be strengthened to go down against the camp." And Gideon was a little scared with only 300 soldiers against a huge army. So Gideon obeyed God and went down to the Midianite camp. Just kind of check it out, sort of spy on the situation. And when he was there, Gideon heard some of the enemy soldiers talking about dreams they'd been having, dreams that God was going to give Gideon the victory in the battle to come. Now, after hearing the enemy soldiers, Gideon immediately worshiped God. Then he went back to his small army and gave them instructions for the battle ahead. He took his 300 men and surrounded the place where the Midianites were camped out. But rather than attack the army, Gideon and his soldiers started shattering clay pots, waving around torches and blowing on their horns and shouting, "For the Lord and for Gideon! For the Lord and for Gideon!" They may have been a small army, but God used the small number of men and their big noise to throw the enemy into total confusion. The sudden noise and torchlight surrounding them spooked the Midianites. Check out what the Bible says happened after that. Each man stood at his position around the camp, and watched as all the Midianites rushed around in a panic, shouting as they ran to escape. When the 300 Israelites blew their ram's horns, the Lord caused the warriors in the camp to fight against each other with their swords. Those who were not killed fled. That's from Judges 7:21 and 22. Not only did God give Gideon's tiny army the victory, but they won the battle without even having to fight. Now, tell me, did Gideon obey God? Yeah. Did the Israelites obey God by obeying Gideon? Yeah, again. So let's say that bottom line together. Obey God. So that true story is pretty cool, huh? Even though Gideon had a much smaller army, he trusted in God. And to win against that much bigger Midianite army, Gideon had to do one very important thing. What was that one important thing? Well, it just happens to be our bottom line. You want to say it with me? All right, here we go. Obey God. That's right. Even when the things he asks us to do don't make sense to us, we can still know that he loves us and he will take care of us. We can trust him. We can obey him without knowing what the end result will be. So, how do we walk it out in our own lives? Well, can you think of some things in your life you feel like God is asking you to do, but it just doesn't seem to make any sense? Maybe he's asking you to be nice to a kid that isn't so nice to you. Or maybe he's asking you to be a kinder brother, or a sister, or a son, or a daughter. Walk out your obedience to God by doing what God says, even if it doesn't make sense. Obeying God, it will be hard sometimes. It might be hard to trust that everything will work out in the end. But Gideon's true story shows us that when we obey God, he'll always come through, and sometimes in surprising ways. See you next time.